From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the African Middle Eastern Division, which is one of the co-sponsors of today's lecture and presentation, I would like to wish you all welcome. We are, very pleased to have you here, and a little later, Hirad Dinavari, the Iranian Senior Reference Librarian for the Iranian World, will introduce our presenter. I'm going to say a few words about the Near East section of the African Middle Eastern Division. It is one of three sections in the division. The other two sections are the Hebraic section and the African section. The African section is responsible for developing the collection from and about sub-Saharan Africa. The Hebraic section is responsible for developing the collection in Hebraica and Judaica worldwide. And the Near East section is responsible for developing the collection from and about the 22 Arab countries, Iran, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, the countries of the Caucasus, Turkey, the Turkic republics of Central Asia, and the Muslims in Western China, Russia, and the Balkans. So that defines the Near East in a very broad brush. The specialist and reference librarians of the section are the primary individuals responsible for both developing the collection and providing reference access to it. And of course, these noontime lectures and other programs are part of our not only outreach, but of making our collections known. And we are particularly happy when the presenters are researchers or other persons who have become familiar with our collections and have specialities. The collection itself consists of about 480,000 books in the local languages of the Middle East, about half in Arabic, about 70 to 75,000 in Persian and Turkish, and then a whole bunch of 36 other languages, all the way down to Ingush, in which we have 12 volumes. And if that seems few, 2 years ago we only had 9. So there's growth all across the collections. I'm now going to ask Todd Harvey, who is going to represent our co-sponsors, the American Folklife Center, to say some words about his center.
Thanks, Chris. Good afternoon. The American Folklife Center is delighted to co-sponsor this lecture by Dr. Ulrich Marzolph. Dr. Marzolph is a well-known scholar in the folklife community, and we're grateful to have him in residence at the Library of Congress, if only for a few days. The Folklife Center is the largest ethnographic archives in the United States and contains significant collections from the Near East. Our Iranian world collections, as of yesterday, have gained new prominence due to Dr. Marzolph's generosity. Through him, the Folklife Center has acquired the L.L. Sutton collection of Persian folk tales, comprised of sound recordings and related notes documenting Persian folk tales collected by Lawrence Paul L.L. Sutton in Iran during the 1950s to the 1970s. Dr. Marzolph set for an interview with us yesterday, and this will undoubtedly prove a valuable resource for future researchers who will be using the collections. I would invite you all to come down to the Folklife Center if you get a chance. We're just down on the ground floor around the corner. And so thank you to Dr. Marzolph and to the African and Middle Eastern Division for allowing us to co-sponsor this lecture today. Back to Chris.
Okay, thank you, Todd. As I mentioned earlier, the reference librarians and specialists are the primary individuals who developed the collections that we provide for scholars to use here. And I would now like to ask Mr. Hirad Dinavari, the Iranian World Senior Reference Librarian, to come forward and tell us about today's presenter. However, I'm going to add something of a personal note about today's presenter. As Todd said, he is a very well-known scholar, and purely by accident yesterday I discovered just how thorough the professor is. He is a co-author and co-editor on an Arabian Nights encyclopedia. And 30 years ago, at the request of an editor of a very obscure journal, I did a bibliographic article about illustrated translations of the Arabian Nights. And it is actually listed in this bibliography, which gives you an idea that, you know, how thorough this gentleman is. Now, without further ado, I'd like to ask Hirad to come forward.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, everyone, for coming on a beautiful sunny day like this. I'm sure you'd rather be outside. It is a great honor that we have Dr. Marzolph here. It's not often that we get scholars of such high caliber here. He's also very humble. We happen to have 18 of his books in our collections, books that have been written by himself or co-authored. A number of them are in German, and I'm not going to try to pronounce them. But he has also written a number of items in Persian, the last two of which he just kindly donated to us the other day. Bohlul Name, which is a lithograph that he has republished in modern form. Bohlul Name and Akhbar Name, which is a lithograph that I was mentioning that has been republished. And in previous years, the Iranian state had given him an award for his work on Persian lithographic Shahnames, which we have here. I'm going to take a minute and read his biography. This is extremely humble. I think we could go on speaking about his work for a long time, but I will do a brief bio and turn it over to him so that he can take the rest of the time and give his wonderful lecture. Dr. Ulrich Marzolph is a professor of Islamic studies at the Georg-August-University in Göttingen, Germany, a senior member of the editorial committee of the Enzyklopädie des Märchens, or Encyclopedia of Fairy Tales, a research and a publishing institute at the Academy of Sciences at Göttingen. He specializes in narrative culture of the Islamic, Near and Middle East, with a particular emphasis on Arab and Persian folk narrative, popular literature, and related fields. In the field of visual culture and history of printing in Iran, he has published the monograph studies Narrative Illustration in Persian Lithographed Books, 2001, and was translated into Persian in 2011. The Shahnameh album, which I just showed you in 2004, co-authored with Muhammad Hadi Mohammadi, Akbar Nameh, which he just, Akhbar Nameh, which he just gave us as a gift, by co-authored with Pegah Khadish, as well as a number of other books that I mentioned, and numerous essays that he has done over the years. Without taking any further time, I'm going to ask Dr. Marzolph to come up here and take the podium and enlighten us all with his amazing new research, which is this lithographic scroll that he's been working on recently. Thank you.
Thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you, a big thank you actually to all of the collaborators at the Library of Congress who made this talk possible, the people at the African and Middle Eastern section, Mary Jane Deeb, Chris Murphy, Hirad Dinavari, and of course to the Folklife Center, my special thanks for taking care in the future of Elwell Sutton's collection, a task that I could never do with the same degree of reliability. Human life is short. The life of the Library of Congress will definitely be longer. So what I'm going to be presenting to you today is unfortunately not in particular relation with any holdings of the Library of Congress, unless you intend to acquire this beautiful piece in the future. But this is part of my research, my ongoing research on Persian lithographic printing. I am presenting a Shiite pilgrimage scroll from the Qajar period, vaguely the 19th century, and we'll start with an introduction on illustrated Hajj certificates. Now, the Hajj certificates are stylized legal documents testifying to the fact that a certain individual has participated in the pilgrimage to Mecca and has executed the required rituals. Providing that one can afford it physically as well as financially, it is obligatory for every Muslim to undertake the pilgrimage to Mecca at least once in his or her lifetime. Meanwhile, it is common practice that people who for various reasons are not able to do so would delegate their obligation to another individual so as to perform the pilgrimage in their stead. Accordingly, the certificates either testify to the pilgrimage of the person physically present or to the fact that this person participated in pilgrimage as somebody else's proxy. In historical terms, the chief importance of Hajj certificates lies in their documentary value. Meanwhile, because of their artistic content, they also pertain to the field of Islamic art, since many of the certificates contain illustrations of the sacred Muslim sites in Mecca and Medina, sometimes also including the Harem in Jerusalem. These visual representations of the sacred Muslim sites supplied in the Hajj certificates are early specimens of illustrations that later served to guide pilgrims at the sacred sites of Islam. The slides I have to accompany this are taken from various sources. This is some of the earliest fragments of illustrated pilgrimage documents dating from the 13th century. Now, talking about pilgrimage guides, illustrations similar to those first appearing in the Hajj certificates are, for instance, regularly included in such widely used books as the Dala'il al-Khairat of Muhammad ibn Sulaiman al-Jazuli, that's a book from the mid of the 15th century, or a Futuh al-Haramain of Muhyiddin Lari, 16th century, and similar images were also produced on single leaves. The public display of illustrated Hajj certificates in mosques might furthermore have given rise to depictions of the sacred precincts in Mecca and Medina on tiles, a phenomenon that is particularly documented from the Ottoman period. Besides the extremely valuable hoard of documents dating from the Seljuk and Mamluk periods that is today preserved in the Istanbul Museum of Turkish and Islamic Art, a number of manuscript copies of Hajj certificates have been published and discussed. Particularly magnificent specimens include, for instance, the 212 centimeter, 2 meter long pilgrimage scroll testifying to the Hajj of a certain Maymuna bint Abdallah az-Zardali in 1433, preserved in the British Museum in London. And what I'm able to show here is just a fragment of the 2 meter scroll. The same goes for the other large scrolls. This is the equally brilliant and 665 centimeter long scroll acknowledging the Umrah of Sayyid Yusuf ibn Sayyid Shahabuddin Mawara al-Nahri from Central Asia, dated the 21st of Muharram 1837, that's 1433, kept in the Museum of Islamic Art in Qatar. And we have another spectacular piece. This is the late 18th century pilgrimage scroll, sized 9 meter and 20 centimeters, containing images of Mecca, Medina, Jerusalem, Najaf, and other sites. And this scroll has recently been acquired by the Aga Khan Foundation. Most studies so far of Hajj certificates and related phenomena are concerned with specimens that are either very old or that are particularly attractive in terms of their execution. Fairly recent items, such as the fascinating 18th century metal plaque for printing a pilgrimage certificate preserved in the Walters Arts Museum in Baltimore, have not received much attention. And an item like the late 19th century Mecca certificate reproduced in 1900 in Samuel Zwemer's study Arabia, the Cradle of Islam, has also gone largely unnoticed. Even in comparison to many of the brilliantly executed historical pieces, the specimen published by Zwiemer is not devoid of interest. Notably, its traditional iconography of the pilgrimage sites in Mecca and Medina is by no means less detailed than that of its historical predecessors. The chief importance of the printed certificate, however, lies not in its historical value or its artistic merit. This particular item, which interestingly also has a somewhat more recent sibling, this is dating from around 1930, this particular item rather becomes meaningful since it was produced and distributed in the hundreds, probably even thousands of copies. And since my background is not only that of a philologist, but rather that of a folklorist, this is the special focus of my interest. Being distributed in the hundreds and thousands, this item gains a social dimension as a document testifying to the continuation of a traditional practice with modern technical means. Modern printed Hajj certificates were not only available to the privileged few, who historically would have spent considerable funds on the production of magnificently executed items. Here, for the first time in history, Hajj certificates become commodified accessories for pilgrims. In addition to the printed Hajj certificates with a standard set of 4 images, there were also printed certificates for specific single sites, such as Medina, as here demonstrated by the published specimen of a mid-19th century Medina certificate. Now, while recent printed certificates, such as those discussed just now, deserve attention, it is striking to note that most of the pilgrimage documents studied so far pertain to a Sunni perspective. Although visual aspects of Shiite Muslim culture have increasingly gained attention in recent Western scholarship, the visual dimension of pilgrimage from a Shiite perspective still calls for adequate consideration. Notably, the Shiite perspective relates to both the pilgrimage to Mecca, that is the Hajj or Umrah, and to the popular pilgrimage, in Persian called ziyarat, to major sites of Shiite remembrance and worship in Iraq and Iran, such as the tombs of the Imams, the so-called Atabat, and of course the innumerable shrines of their descendants, the Imams Zadis. The popular pilgrimages have always been regarded as meritorious acts of devotion. In the Safavid period, they had acquired growing canonical status. Theoretically, they were even placed on the same level as the Hajj. Pilgrimage certificates, often without illustrations, attesting visits to the shrine of Imam Reza in Mashhad, are known from as early as the 16th century. And single leaf prints depicting the tragic events of Karbala are known to have been produced at the beginning of the 20th century, when they were probably distributed or sold to Shiite pilgrims, say, at the shrines of Najaf or Karbala. These images not only constituted items of pious commemoration, but would probably also have served to document the owner's visit to the sites of Shiite pilgrimage in Najaf and or Karbala. As a direct case in point, and I'm still introducing the document I'm going to talk about, there is a Shiite Hajj certificate dated 1904. This document demonstrates features that are closely similar to those of the corresponding Sunni items. As in the Sunni documents, the text leaves blank spaces intended to fill in the name of the pilgrim and his place of origin. You can see the blank spaces in the middle section, lines 2, 3, and 4. Instead of the regular set of 4 sites of pilgrimage in the printed Sunni documents, this Shi'i Hajj certificate in its top section illustrates a set of 5 sites that imply a distinct Shiite perspective, particularly for the last 2 representations, and this is a blow up. Reading the images, as we should from right to left, we have, first of all, the Harem in Mecca, second, a double image depicting a pilgrimage and a pilgrim and a number of sheep at Mount Arafat, above, and 2 pilgrims to the side of a set of steps representing the so-called Mas'ah, the trotting space between Safa and Marwa below. These are Sunni sites. In addition to these two Sunni sites, the sites of the Sunni, or rather the common Muslim dimension of the pilgrimage in Mecca, there is an image, and this is the third one in the middle, of the Prophet Muhammad's mosque at Medina, that also belongs to the regular set of images depicted on the Sunni Hajj certificates. The next illustration then depicts the cemetery in Medina known as Baqi', here denoted in Persian as Bargah Baqi', a site that is rarely, if ever, included in the visual program of the Sunni Hajj certificates. This cemetery is particularly dear to the Shiite community because it not only holds the graves of Muhammad's wives and his daughter Fatima, but also those of a number of the early Shiite imams. We have the graves of the second Imam al-Hassan, the fourth Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein, the fifth Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, and the sixth Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq. Of course, today the cemetery's mausoleums are in ruins due to their destruction by iconoclast Wahhabites in 1925-26. The fifth and final illustration on the document's far left depicts the so-called oasis Fadak, Bagh Fadak, a place that was formerly renowned for its rich date palms. This site is also imbued with a particular significance for the Shiite community. Before the spread of Islam, the oasis had belonged to the Jewish community, who gave it to Muhammad as part of the agreement of peace they had reached. Muhammad devoted the revenue from the date palms to the needy travelers and the poor. Following Muhammad's death, there began a dispute between his daughter Fatima and the first caliph Abu Bakr regarding the question who was Fadak's rightful owner. Whereas Fatima, the Prophet's daughter, regarded the oasis as part of her inheritance, Abu Bakr remained that the revenue should be spent in exactly the same way as the Prophet had previously settled it. Since Fatima could not produce witnesses sustaining her claim that would satisfy Abu Bakr, he did not give in. The Shiite community regards Abu Bakr's rejection of Fatima's claim as an act of injustice that belongs to a series of Sunni atrocities denying the Prophet's family its rightful position and inheritance, together with the Persian text, part of which describes the pilgrim's acts during his journey to the various sacred sites. This Hajj certificate thus presents a decidedly Shiite perspective. During my residence at the Doris Duke Foundation for Islamic Art in Shangri-La, Honolulu, Hawaii, in September-October 2012, an illustrated 19th century Shiite pilgrimage scroll printed by way of lithography has come to my attention. The scroll is currently preserved in a private collection and has been acquired in the Iranian city of Kerman in 1971. It is sized approximately 20 centimeters by 2 meters. The paper is printed in 6 sections and adhered to a fabric backing. Since I wanted to give you a little blow up larger than the one on the original poster, I have cut this in 2 sections. You have 3 of the printed sections above and more or less with a certain overlap 3 sections below. In a small section at the document's far left, we find mention of the person who commissioned its printing. This is contemporary wording in Persian, hasb al-qahisha, according to the wish or to the order of so-and-so, and the patron's name is given as Muhammad Ja'far Kasai, a cloth merchant, as it says, Bazzaz from Kerbala. Commissioning and thus paying for the production of any item of religious import was regarded as deserving religious reward, sawab. So the client would have made it a point to have his name mentioned. Judging from the style of its illustrations, the scroll was made around the end of the 19th or the beginning of the 20th century. The scroll consists essentially of 2 areas of different nature, and this is just the first section to show you the different areas. Both the top and the bottom areas contain poetry, 2 lines above and 2 lines below, and the scroll's middle area has a total of 24 images illustrating the various Shiite pilgrimage sites. Before going in detail to present the images, let me say a few words about the verses. In the poetry area, each verse is written in 2 lines and bordered by an ornamental frame that separates it from the following one. Each section contains 7 verses, totaling 84 verses altogether. These verses are fairly crude in terms of meter and simple as well as repetitive in wording. Most of them rhyme with kardim, we did so and so, and most of the final verses on the bottom of sections 5 and 6 rhyme on either avardeim, we brought, or resid, it came. In general, the verses, each of which forms an independent unit, illustrate the pilgrim's progress. If one wants to follow this itinerary chronologically, one would first read all of the verses on the top border and then continue with the ones on the bottom border. Most of the verses deal with the pilgrim's sojourn in Mecca, Medina, Najaf, Kufa, and Karbala. Other sites of Shiite pilgrimage, such as the sites in Qasim, Samarra, and Mashhad, are only mentioned in passing and only in the final section on the bottom of the scroll. The verses are pronounced in the first person plural, we. So they are obviously spoken by an individual representing a group of people, such as the leader or guide of pilgrims. In fact, the verses are a rare specimen of the poetry known as Chawushi Khani. That is, the verses pronounced by the pilgrimage guide known as Chawush or Chawosh during the return of the pilgrims to their homes. Besides guiding the pilgrims and instructing them about the proper execution of pilgrimage rituals, the Chawush was responsible for travel arrangements of all kinds, including means of travel and accommodation. The verses recited by the Chawush present a rhymed and somewhat stylized narrative of the pilgrims' visit to different locations, including their experiences on the way and the presents they brought back to their home community. It is open to speculation, and we know very little about that, to which extent verses of this kind were either pronounced spontaneously, a fact that would probably help to account for their fairly crude character, or whether they were recited from booklets known as Chawushi-name, a genre obviously denoting simple and uncritical publications of the bazaar kind. Similar booklets containing the text of ta'ziyah dramas or of venerated persons like Hussein, Bibi Sharbanu, Hussein's half-brother Abul Fazl Abbas, Muslim ibn Akhil, or Hussein's sons Qasim and Ali Akbar are still sold today. This is part of a small collection of these books that I hold myself. As time does not really allow me to discuss the verses in more detail, and I'm afraid to bore you here, let me simply draw your attention to the final verses. Here, mention is made of the spiritual as well as physical presence the speaker brings back from his journey. For instance, they say from the tomb of the 7th Imam, Musa al-Kazim, they brought back some soil, khak, to be used for the preparation of a special ointment to protect the eyes, tutya. By visiting the site where the 12th Imam Muhammad al-Mahdi, the Imam Zaman, is supposed to have gone into occultation, the pilgrims have earned for themselves a document testifying that all their sins had been forgiven. And the speaker, this is the lines you can see on the screen, finishes by wishing that God may enable all Shiite Muslims to visit Najaf and Karbala, as well as the Harem of the 8th Imam Ali ibn Musa Reza in Mashhad every single year. In its middle area, flanked by the verse narrative above and below, in a total of 24 images, the pilgrimage scroll presents a visualization of the sites and buildings that bear particular relevance for Shiite Muslim pilgrims. Now remember, the verse narrative focuses on Mecca, Medina, Najaf, Kufa, and Karbala, and mentions other sites of Shiite pilgrimage such as Qasim, Samarra, and Mashhad only in the final summary. The visual journey shows a different emphasis. The journey starts in Mecca and the ritual sites in its vicinity, which we have here on the top part on the right side, the images 1 and 2, followed by Mecca and the local Shiite pilgrimage sites of Baqi and Fadak. And at this point, the visits to sites related to the Hajj in the strict sense are finished. After concluding their visit to the pilgrimage sites in Saudi Arabia, Sunni Muslims would be likely to continue their journey by visiting, say, for instance, the Harem in Jerusalem, from where Muhammad, according to legend, set out on his nocturnal journey, the Mi'raj. Shiite travelers, however, would aim to visit sites of particular relevance for the history of Shi'ism, especially the shrines of the Shiite imams, the so-called Atabat. The scroll's visually journey thus continues to Kufa, Najaf, and Karbala, all three of them belonging to the sites that are prominently mentioned in the verses. After Karbala, the second half of the images then proceeds to picture sites that receive little or no attention in the verses, such as Qazemain, Samarra, Qom, near present-day Tehran, Qom, south of Tehran, Ray, near Tehran, Nishabur, on the way to Mashhad. And the final site the pilgrim visits is Mashhad. While most sites depicted on the scroll are located in either Saudi Arabia or Iraq, Shiite sites of pilgrimage within the borders of Iran receive particular attention, even though some of them are only minor sites. The journey both culminates and ends in Mashhad. Considered together, the starting point of the visual journey is a Hajj proper, which is then followed by the pilgrim's return to Iran, on the way visiting Shiite sites of remembrance in Iraq. As the verse narrative mentions, the pilgrims would have started their journey by traveling from Iran to Saudi Arabia by boat. So the obvious choice for their return journey is the land route, during which religious merit would be earned by visiting Shiite sites of pilgrimage in Iraq and Iran. If one considers the distance of more than 3,500 kilometers that pilgrims would have had to travel between Mecca and Mashhad, and if one adds certain periods of sojourn at the sites of pilgrimage, it is not unlikely that prior to the accessibility of modern means of travel, such a journey would have lasted at least several months, probably even up to half a year. In terms of number of images dedicated to a specific location, the visual journey clearly emphasizes the visit to Karbala with a total of 5 images. I'm going into some more detail just in a minute. And the final destination at the sanctuary of Imam Reza, including the site east of Nishabur, where his footprints are worshipped, is represented with a total of 6 images. So we have a certain emphasis. Most of the images, as you can see, are divided into a top and a bottom half. The two halves are usually separated by an ornamental band bearing the caption that is usually positioned just below the middle of the images. In the images depicting a mosque or a similar type of sanctuary, the top half presents the building from a distance with its centrally placed dome and most often minarets on both sides. The domes of the larger shrines are so-called onion domes with a finial at their crest. They usually rest on a drum, sometimes a slightly elongated one that would often display a number of windows. The domes of the smaller shrines are round and do not rest on a drum. A golden cover of the domes and sometimes of the minarets is visualized by brick structure, obviously golden tiles, while tile covers are depicted as flowers or geometrical ornaments. The bottom half of the mausoleum-type shrine shows a cross-section of the sanctuary that allows a glimpse into the building's inside. Here, one would regularly see the silver lattice structure enclosing the venerated individual's tomb in a room that is adorned with centrally placed chandeliers, symmetrically arranged lamps, and sometimes additional candlesticks on the floor. Frequently, the sanctuary's tomb chamber is flanked by small entry chambers on both sides. In terms of architectural details, the buildings are presented in a fairly uniform manner. However, the artist has taken great care to introduce a certain variation in the patterns of the brickwork or of the ornamental tiles. In a similar manner, the inner chambers of the sanctuaries also display divergences in terms of the amount or arrangement of lamps and chandeliers. While the majority of the images depict buildings, 2 images present bird's eye views of larger areas. And this is Mecca, top section just on the right side, and the image number 7, Kufa, the Masjid of Kufa, which is on the top section just in the middle. Some images include renderings of landscape or elements of nature, such as trees. With the exception of the commemorative building dedicated to Bibi Shahid Banu, all of the images depicting shrines are adorned on the top with either 1 or 2 crescents with a 5-pointed star in their center. Sometimes 2 crescents may denote the shrines of more than 1 individual, while at other times it probably just serves to emphasize the respective individual's particular significance. Now, let me take you on the visual journey that this scroll presents. Starting with the Harem in Mecca, which is depicted as a square of equally long sides with a Kaaba in its center. The square is surrounded by a number of arcades, opening up into its inner side. Similar arcades are depicted in the 4 corners, with the one in the upper left corner bearing the image's caption, Shabih Makkah Mu'azzameh. The image views the holy precinct in the traditional manner from the entrance on its north side, the Bab Salam, a gate that is also mentioned in the verses as the standard entrance. Except for the Kaaba, which is displayed in a 3-dimensional perspective, all other structures are presented in flat projection, emulating a bird's eye view. Most of the additional structures are oriented towards the Kaaba in the image's center. 2 pairs of identically ornamented minarets, 1 pair above and the other below, point from the square's 4 corners towards the center. The traditionally depicted details of the Kaaba are clearly discernible. The building rests on an outwardly protruding platform. We see the black stone on the building's eastern corner, here on the left side, which is indicated by a curving white line against the building's black draping, the kiswa. The Kaaba's door appears to be open, enabling the viewer to look inside the building. On the Kaaba's right side, there is the area known as Hijr Ismail, surrounded by a stone wall, and on the building's corner opposite to the black stone, there is the gutter known as Mizab al-Rahma. 4 single words, of which the one on the left side is barely legible, are written inside the Haram and surrounding the Kaaba on its 4 sides. They identify some of the smaller structures inside the holy precinct, including the wooden pavilions belonging to the 4 legal schools of Sunni Islam, albeit here not in the correct allocation. Starting from the top and reading clockwise, the captions identify the Shafi'i, Hanbali, Hanafi, Hanbali, Maliki, and Hanafi. No, sorry, I'm getting mixed up here. Shafi'i top, Hanbali right, Hanafi and Maliki pavilions. While the correct order, starting from the bottom and reading clockwise, should be Shafi'i, Hanbali, Maliki, and Hanafi. So the artist here got something mixed up. 2 structures in the foreground appear to be pulpits, and other structures that had often been depicted in other traditional illustrations, notably the Zamzam well and the Maqam Ibrahim, are not explicitly identified. The second image depicts Mina and Mount Arafat in the top section and the trotting space between Safa and Marwa in the bottom section. In the image of Mount Arafat, the slopes of the mountainous region are indicated by short and curved hatched lines in the foreground and large tufts of grass in the background. A fence-like structure of the bottom of the image is, to me at least, somewhat enigmatic. The bottom image here establishes the trotting space between Safa and Marwa by 2 rows of arcades on the image's top and bottom. The respective sides themselves are indicated by 2 sets of steps. The site on the left is made of larger bricks and has 4 steps. The smaller bricks of the site on the right allow for 6 steps, equaling roughly the same height. This is the Prophet's Mosque in Medina, which is portrayed in the standard manner, as I've outlined in the introduction to the images. In the image's top section, the mosque's centrally placed dome is flanked by 2 minarets, both of them, as well as the dome, adorned with, obviously, tile work. 2 crescents and stars between the minarets emphasize Muhammad's superior position in Islam. The Prophet's tomb chamber in the bottom section is lit by a chandelier and 2 symmetrically placed separate lamps, as well as 2 large candles and candlesticks on the ground. The small entrance rooms on both sides of the tomb chamber are also lit by lamps. The image of the cemetery of Baqi in Medina shows a single sanctuary, probably a mausoleum for one of the 4 Shiite imams buried there. Neither the caption nor any other particular characteristics in the image, such as the number of lamps, allow a further specification. Displaying a decorated dome, the mausoleum's tomb chamber follows the standard visual layout in the scroll. In fact, in this particular case, the imagery appears to be fairly stereotyped, since the sanctuary displays the typical features of a Shiite, or rather an Iranian-style shrine. This is particularly evident in the silver lattice structure enclosing the venerated individual's tomb. As the shrines in the cemetery have been destroyed, it would have to be determined from textual evidence whether the depiction corresponded to reality or not. The scroll's next image depicts the orchard in the oasis Fadak that, as already mentioned, according to the Shia perspective, was unlawfully denied to Muhammad's daughter Fatima. The image's caption has artistically been integrated in the decoration at the orchard's gate. The spectator views the area from outside while looking inside over and above the closed entrance gate. The orchard is framed by walls on the left and right sides, and at the far end of the perspectively reduced central walkway, we see a pavilion adorned with a small dome. The agricultural areas on both sides of the walkway are indicated by a single palm tree each, the fertility of which, interestingly, is indicated by 2 bundles of dates dangling beneath their leaves. A large leaf-bearing tree whose top covers the image's upper center would offer some shade to the visitors. Fadak now is the last site in the vicinity of the standard Muslim pilgrimage sites in Mecca and Medina. Next, the visual journey of the pilgrimage scroll continues towards the sacred sites of Iraq. The first Shiite site in Iraq visited during the visual journey is the Mosque of Ali in the city of Najaf. The image's caption refers to Ali not by name, but by his equally unambiguous honorific title Amir, which stands short for Arabic Amir al-Mu'minin, the commander of the faithful. The mosque is presented in the standard fashion with a dome that is centrally placed between 2 symmetrically arranged minarets. Both the dome and the minarets are notably not covered with ornaments to emulate tile work. And we know historically that at the order of Nader Shah Afshar, that's first half of the 18th century, the previously existing tile work had been removed and replaced by golden plates that are here emulated by a brick-like design. The tomb chamber is also illustrated in the standard fashion with a centrally placed chandelier and a number of single lamps. Again, the tomb chamber is flanked by 2 small entrance rooms. The visual journey continues to the Mosque of Kufa. For various reasons, this city holds central importance for the Shia community. First, its inhabitants refused to come to Hussein's support, as they had previously let him believe they would, thus leaving his small group of warriors at the mercy of Yazid's troops. Second, Kufa is also regarded as a place of resistance against Sunnite oppression, since various incidents connected with the events of Karbala are located here. Muslim ibn Aqil ibn Abi Talib, a cousin of Ali ibn Abi Talib's sons Hassan and Hussein, had served as an army commander under Ali and later his son Hassan. When Hussein decided to accept the invitation of the population of Kufa to serve as their imam, he had sent Muslim to Kufa as his emissary to explore the situation and assure the population's allegiance. Muslim was, however, sought out by Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, the Caliph Yazid's governor in Basra, and executed in the year 680, about a month before the Battle of Kerbala. Immediately after him, Hani ibn Urwa, a man who had temporarily given him shelter, was also executed. Even though Muslim did not die at the Battle of Kerbala, Shiites also regard him as a martyr. His fate is experienced as particularly painful since Muslims' two adolescent sons, Muhammad and Ibrahim, were also killed by the caliph's men. And this short excursion into history is necessary to understand the different mausolea at the Mosque of Kufa. Here we have an image which is slightly wider than the two previous ones, illustrating the mosque in Kufa in a mixture again of bird's eye view and flat projection. The mosque courtyard is shown as a regular square with sides of equal length, each side of which is occupied by 6 open chambers. The image's caption is placed in the middle of the courtyard that is otherwise filled with a total of 6 small pavilions and 3 centrally placed, somewhat enigmatic elements. A vertical element just north of the square's center appears to be a column. An octagonal element below the center looks like a water basin, and below the water basin there is a boat-like structure. According to late 19th century eyewitness accounts, the column, whose height is given at more than 5 meters, used to serve as the gnomon of a large sundial that would indicate the correct times of prayer. Popular belief had it that men who were able to span the column with the small fingers and thumbs of their hands, somewhat this wise, with the small fingers and thumbs of their hands meeting, could be sure of their legitimate birth. In order to spare men with smaller hands a possible disgrace, the authorities allegedly thinned the column's breadth at a specific height. Well, this is popular tradition. Muslim tradition regards the side of the mosque in general as the dwelling place of Noah, who is said to have constructed his ark here. Some explanations link the octagonal element, the water basin, to the boiling cauldron mentioned in the Quran, stating that it was water flowing from this particular pit that caused the deluge. According to Muslim tradition, the mosque was established by Adam, and so both Adam and Noah are venerated here as mentioned in the accompanying verses. The square's top side opens to a rectangular entrance area about a quarter the size of the square that is flanked by small open chambers. To the left and right sides of the entrance area we see the mausoleums of Muslim and Hani, the captions being placed on an ornamental band just below the domes. Both buildings are fairly unpretentious. Their small domes depicted from the outside do not contain any particular adornment, and the view into the inner chamber shows 2 relatively small tombs. While the martyrs are thus awarded due recognition, their tombs are clearly second in importance to those of the Shiite imams and those of Hussein's companions that died in Kerbala. The central site of Shiite commemoration is the shrine of Hussein in Kerbala. Given its prominence, this image is considerably wider than the following 3 images in this section. In addition to Hussein's mausoleum, the image's caption mentions 3 other sites of Shiite worship, that is here the tomb of Habib ibn Muzahir, Mary's palm tree, and the tombs of the martyrs of Kerbala. The shrine housing Hussein's tomb is depicted in the standard manner. Its dome is golden, and the 2 minarets to the dome sides are adorned with identical ornaments. In addition to the standard layout of the buildings, there is a flag protruding from the dome's upper right side and a star on the dome's tip. The tomb's actual shape is somewhat different from the usual rectangular layout in that there is a short extension added on one side. Here, the illustrator aims to emulate this feature by depicting a void space between the shrine's two sections, thereby indicating that he was well aware of the tomb's unusual shape. The tomb chamber is also depicted in the standard manner, but the usual chambers to both sides of the tomb are here used for different purposes. On the image's far right, and right beneath the related inscription, there is a small chamber holding the tomb of Habib ibn Muzahir, one of Hussein's companions, killed during the Battle of Karbala. Rising above the tomb chamber, there is an additional minaret of slightly smaller size, whose adornment differs from that of the two minarets flanking the central dome. Between the small tomb chamber of Habib and the large one of Hussein, again placed right beneath the related inscription, there is a small room labeled as Mary's palm tree, Nakhle Maryam. The image shows two short columns that apparently symbolize two palm trees. And again, we can refer to Muslim popular tradition, for which this side marks the side where Mary gave birth to Jesus. The Quran mentions that after having conceived Jesus, Mary retired to a remote place where she gave birth under a palm tree. Having been constructed by order of the Jalairid Sultan Uwais I in the 14th century, this site was actually destroyed by the provincial government in the 1940s, so it is not there anymore. Beneath the minaret on the left side, there is a separate small chamber that apparently holds a tomb with the remains of some of the other martyrs who died at Hussein's side. Now, I think actually, as time is running short, I will take you to the other sites a little bit more rapidly, just by giving a few comments. Here we have in Najaf the Khaymegah. That is the place where Hussein and his army are said to have pitched their tents. Just a simple building with a dome. This is the mausoleum for Hazrat Abbas, Hussein's half-brother, who played a very prominent role in the narratives about the Battle of Karbala, as he was cruelly mutilated by the enemy when he attempted to fetch water from the river for his thirsty companions. That's a very, very well-known element of the battle at Karbala. And here it goes into one of the companions, Hur ibn Yazid, who according to Shiite tradition actually is the first person to enter paradise, where Muhammad will be waiting for him. This is a very particular reason because Hur was originally fighting on the Caliph's sides and then switched sides to assist Hussein's army. So according to Shiite tradition, he has deserved a spectacular merit, which is thus honored by him being the first one to enter paradise. The children of Muslims, the tomb of the children of Muslims, adolescent sons, already mentioned, Muhammad and Ibrahim, are located in the vicinity of Kufa, so here we are already moving on. And this is actually the scroll's widest image, representing the shrine of Qazimain. Qazimain, literally the two Qazims. This shrine today is situated in a quarter on the northwestern outskirts of Baghdad. It holds the tombs of the 7th Imam Musa al-Kazim and the 9th Imam Muhammad al-Taqi. The next image, unfortunately, is heavily damaged, as you can see, but in terms of logical sequence, this must be the shrine for the so-called Askariyin, the two Askaris. That is the Shiite 10th Imam Ali al-Nakhi and the 11th Imam Hassan al-Askari. If it was not the Askariyin, these would actually be the only two out of the 12 Shiite Imams whose shrines would otherwise not be illustrated on the scroll. So we can be fairly certain for this interpretation, and particularly since it is followed by this shrine, which is somewhat unusual since it does not display an actual tomb. This is the shrine of the Cellar, water basin in Samarra, that in particularly Shiite belief is connected to the occultation, the ghaybat, of the 12th Shiite Imam, who is commonly designated as the Sahib Zaman or Imam Zaman, as you can see in the caption. What you see here is a dome and a view into the cellar, where on the left side you can see the basin where allegedly the 12th Shiite Imam was last seen. We travel on from the Iraqi sites to the Shiite sites of pilgrimage in Iran, to the Shiite sites in Iran, and this is the shrine of Hazrat Ma'asumeh, literally the virginal excellency, constituting the shrine of Imam Reza's sister Fatima in Qom. Without ever having married, this Hazrat Ma'asumeh died in Qom in the year 816, aged 28. Paying homage to her shrine is particularly dear to Shiite Muslims, for whom it is second in importance only to the sanctuary of Imam Reza in Mashhad. And according again to popular tradition, based on a statement by her brother, a visit to Hazrat Ma'asumeh earns pilgrims a place in paradise. From Qom, the pilgrim would travel to the shrine of Abdul-Azim in Ray, today a southern suburb of Tehran. Abdul-Azim is not an imam, but a descendant of Ali ibn Abi Talib's eldest son, Al-Hassan. According to Shiite tradition, he lived a secluded and pious life in Ray, and this shrine, whose origins date from the 9th century, has been repeatedly expanded. We have golden plates on the domes dating from the Qajar period, when the minarets flanking it today had actually not yet been constructed. So today's appearance of this shrine is different from what you see on the image. Very unusual for a pilgrimage journey is the visit to the shrine of Bibi Shahar Banu, situated on a mountain in the vicinity of Ray. The shrine is here depicted as a modest building surmounted with a small dome, drawn in hatched lines interspersed with bushels of grass, bushes, flowers, and a single large tree on the shrine's right side indicate the hilly countryside. Now, according to legend, Bibi Shahar Banu was a daughter of the last Sasanian king, Yazdegerd III, who was defeated by the Arabs. Captured and taken to Medina, Bibi Shahar Banu was married to Hussein and bore him the son, Ali Zain al-Abidin, who later became the 4th Shiite Imam. And again, popular tradition lets us know that after the Battle of Kerbala, Bibi Shahar Banu fled back to Iran, pursued by her dead husband's enemies. They were close to her when she reached Ray, and in desperation, she tried to call on God. But instead of saying, Yallahu, her weary tongue uttered, Ya Ku, O mountain. And following this, the mountain opened miraculously, and she found shelter in its rocks. This is the story. Of course, we know from historical evidence that the shrine was built in due course, appears to have been originally a Zoroastrian place of worship. Further approaching Mashhad, we pass a site east of Neshabur, where even today is shown the Khadamgah, a place with the footprint of Imam Reza. And we come to the sanctuary of Imam Reza in Mashhad, with a mosque constructed in 1418 by Gohar Shad, wife of Timurid ruler Shah Rukh. The caption here says Masjid of Gohar Shah, which is a misspelling, a slight misspelling, albeit. The shrine of Imam Reza in Mashhad is the pilgrim's final destination. Here we have again both the dome and the flanking minarets covered in gold. The depiction of the tomb chamber follows the stained layout, and the remaining 3 frames depict 2 sites each, all of them in one way or another related to the life of Imam Reza. This is the only instance where details relating to a venerated person are awarded separate attention, a feature that emphasizes the high standing of Imam Reza amongst the Shiite Iranian community. two items, a large chandelier, Cellar on top, and on the bottom there is an object which is here designated as Siniye Zahar. This is apparently the large round plate that, according to the Shiite reading, the Abbasid ruler Ma'mun handed to Imam Reza while offering him poisoned grapes on the plate. So this is again part of Shiite tradition. Here again the image separate in two halves. The top half, it says Naqare Khane, where the sanctuary's kettle drums are kept. These drums would be beaten at certain intervals or specific periods, such as the rising or setting of the sun. And the frame's bottom half is labeled Shafa Khane Hazrat, the Excellency's Hospital, which again is a misspelling. Here it should clearly read Saqa Khane, which designates one of the fountains in the inside of the sanctuary, the place where water is offered to the thirsty pilgrims. The scroll's final frame depicts details of the shrine of Imam Reza and is also divided into top and bottom half. Here we have the sanctuary's charitable institutions for the needy, naming a kitchen, supplying food, and a hospital offering free medical treatment. The hospital in the bottom section illustrates an open courtyard, and the kitchen in the top section depicts a number of pots and other vessels for cooking. Now, to come to sort of a conclusion. Documents such as the lithographed pilgrimage scroll were probably published and distributed in the hundreds, but no similar item from the Qajar period has so far been published. In terms of visual tradition, the Qajar roll fits in neatly between similar Shiite documents both earlier and later, and what you see here is about 100 years earlier. As a historical document, there is the scroll with Shiite sanctuaries acquired by Danish traveler Carsten Niebuhr in Kerbala in 1765. This scroll, which today is preserved in the Danish National Museum, is the earliest known specimen of its kind. Originally prepared as a scroll of 192 centimeters in length, the paper item was glued onto cardboard and has been cut into 3 pieces of varying length. As in the lithographed item discussed in detail, the Niebuhr scroll takes the viewer on a visual journey from Mecca to Mashhad. It ends, however, in an edit set of figures relating to either Muhammad or Ali. Here we have, from right to left, the Buraq, that is the fabulous steed that served Muhammad on his nocturnal journey, the Mi'raj. Next we have a camel bearing a mahmal, supposedly the mahmal that would contain the new kiswa, that is the large tissue covering the Kaaba that was exchanged for a new one every year. Third, a lion that, as Niebuhr himself had already mentioned, stands for Ali himself. Above the line we have the seal of the Prophet Muhammad. To the left, Ali's horse Duldul. Above the horse, his famous two-bladed sword Zulfiqar. And again to the left, his famous slave Anbar. Here also misspelled, well, it's difficult to see anyhow. The verses framing the images on the Niebuhr scroll on all 4 sides correspond closely to those on the lithographed scroll, and most of the shrines are depicted in a similarly stereotyped manner. While Niebuhr's scroll obviously is a precursor of the lithographed pilgrimage scroll, its successors are Iranian posters dating from various periods of the 20th century. These posters depict more or less the same sides as the pilgrimage scroll in a strikingly modern and colorful style, thus documenting to the lasting tradition of both the Shiite pilgrimage to the Atabat Aliyat, as well as the need for documenting the pilgrim's pious journey. In a mid-20th century specimen of the poster genre, the images essentially have to be read from the upper right to the lower left side, thus probably betraying the poster's origin from the original format of a scroll. In addition to depicting more or less the standard range of pilgrimage size, this poster puts an additional stress on Imam Reza as the one Shiite imam buried in Iranian soil. You can see in the middle, on the right and on the left sides, respectively, two scenes connected to Imam Reza's life and death. On the right side, we see Caliph Ma'mun offering poisoned grapes to Imam Reza, and on the left side, the compassionate Imam Reza asks a hunter to spare a gazelle and her young ones, an anecdote that is also narrated for the Prophet Muhammad himself. Imam Reza's national importance is furthermore stressed by two Iranian flags flanking the golden dome of his sanctuary. The poster's iconography is closely related to the historical pieces, as is its combination of imagery and Chavush Khani verses on the borders. As a successor to the historical pieces, the modern poster also links to similar items that, probably dating from the middle of the 20th century onwards, would focus solely on details of the Mashhad sanctuary and the history of Imam Reza. For instance, you can see here in the lower third, just below the middle on the left and right sides, again the two anecdotes I was mentioning. One of the anecdotes, the compassionate Imam on the right side, and one of his miracles, actually where a disbeliever is being devoured by lions on the left side. So, besides its value as a historical document, the prime importance of the Qajar pilgrimage scroll lies in adding a Shi'i dimension to the study of Hajj certificates, a dimension that in research has so far been neglected. The Shiite dimension is above all evident in the physical aspects of the pilgrimage, as it is presented in both the verse and the visual narrative. Quite naturally, Shi'is would visit sites that are of particular relevance for adherents of the Shiite creed. Visually, this emphasis is already evident for the sites visited in Saudi Arabia, such as the cemetery of Baqi and the oasis of Fadak, none of which play a major role for Sunni pilgrims. Shi'i preferences then become dominant for the sites visited in Iraq, most of which are linked to the traumatic experience of the battle at Karbala. When finally returning to Iran, the Shi'i aspects is widened through the inclusion of sites dedicated to venerated relatives of the various imams. Moreover, by traveling via Qom to Mashhad, the intensity of veneration increases until it culminates in the pilgrim's final destination at the shrine of Imam Reza in Mashhad. By representing this site with a larger amount of detail than any other site, the scroll's image underlines the supreme holiness of the Mashhad shrine, the holiest one within the Iranian territory. In contrast to the Sunni Hajj certificates, for which Mecca is the ultimate goal, and the Hajj is the fulfillment of the supreme religious duty of all Muslims, in the Shi'i pilgrimage certificate, the Hajj proper acquires the character of a mere starting point, almost a prelude to the pilgrim's subsequent journey. This journey is much more than a simple return to the pilgrim's place of origin, since the scroll's visual course eventually succeeds in displacing Mecca. The Shi'i pilgrim's true goal is his visit to the holy sites in Iraq and Iran. His final and, in fact, his ultimate destination instead of Mecca is the sanctuary of Imam Reza in Mashhad. By relying on the Hajj paradigm and by combining its traditional visual code with the specifically Iranian element of Chavushi Khani traditions, the scroll succeeds in Iranicizing the pilgrimage, in embedding the sacred Iranian territory in a Shiite worldview, and in sacralizing the holy Shi'i sites. Further findings will hopefully enable us in the future to explore the content of the illustrated Shiite pilgrimage scroll in more detail. Whether this and similar pilgrimage certificates acted as records of pilgrimage by proxy, or whether they were acquired and kept by the pilgrims themselves as personal mementos or tokens replacing the urge to carry home one's experience of the place, obviously they served an important function. From today's analytical perspective, they attest to the transformation of geographical places into visually constructed sacred spaces, and of terrestrial geography into religious topography, hereby authenticating the related set of religious practices and beliefs. These mechanisms are ruled by a specific interpretation of history that on the one hand historicizes Shi'ism, while on the other presenting the historical events from a decidedly Shi'i-Iranian perspective. In this manner, the lithographed Shi'i pilgrimage scroll also testifies to the growing self-awareness of the Shi'i community in the Qajar period, an awareness that, again, only in the 20th century would begin to receive its due scholarly recognition. And I thank you for your attention.
Dr. Marzolph, thank you very much for a wonderful lecture. I really cannot thank you enough for an amazing presentation. Feel free to ask any questions. I just want to mention that if you do ask questions, you're being recorded, and your questions essentially are giving us consent for us to film you and to subsequently webcast you. If there are any questions, I'll give you 5 minutes because we're already running over time. Thank you. The site that is very important now for Zainab in Syria, at this time in the Qajar era, was it not as important of a site? Just out of curiosity.
I could not tell you. It's not taken into consideration here, obviously. It would probably not also be on the regular route.
Yeah, because it's going
So,
east.
yeah, you would have to go a different way.
Right.
Mhm.
Again, thank you very, very much, Professor Marzolph. It was actually quite a remarkable journey that we took on this. So my question is on the document that you found, the one that you found in Hawaii, the original document. Was that a unique piece, or were there others that were made like it for other people to get on those privileges? Or is that made for a special person going on that special privilege?
Well, thank you for this question, because this relates exactly to the importance of lithographic printing as a means of producing printed items in the Qajar period, and the rarity and precious character of these items. We know that lithographed items, like if we talk about books, were produced probably on the average in 300, 400, 500 copies. The maximum, they say sometimes 1,000, but let's stay to the average of, say, 400, 500. Now, this was produced from the middle of the 19th century to the beginning of the 20th century. Of the, say, 400 books produced, we often only have a single one left. These items, of course, were meant to be used. Books were meant to be read. Posters were, hung to the wall. They would pass through different hands. And one should probably mention also I would not exactly call it a disrespect, but a different way of handling printed material. Manuscript material was always looked at with great attention, taken care of, because people knew that manuscripts are unique. Printed items, people probably had the idea that they did not possess any particularly worth, since there were hundreds of them. And nobody would have thought that even after a century of these hundreds of copies that were originally there, only one or a few would be left. Now, I mean, if I look to my personal experience with printed books, lithographed books, I know of several items like Shahnames that are today probably preserved in public libraries, say in 10 to 15 copies. But really, most of them are unique. Some of them are only in private collections, and many of the specimens are even not complete, but only fragmentary. So now, if you apply these somewhat lengthy considerations on the lithographic book to a lithographed scroll, as here, you can see the difficulties. It would not really make sense to print a single copy. So we should presume that this one person who acted as a patron for the printing actually had a couple of hundreds printed and probably distributed in terms of religious merit to the pilgrims, whether in Najaf or Kerbala or maybe even in Mashhad. He has his name on there, and that name, let's face it, makes him immortal. I mean, we have no idea who this Ja'far al-Qasa'i was, but his name is here, and that way he stays alive. So he has the merit linked to the scroll whose printing he actually financed. Now, I should say, I've done a lot of research on this piece. The moment I came across, the private owner did not even consider it as something special, because he had bought it when he was a young man in Iran, and he had put it on the wall, and he just liked it for the images. Now, being a specialist in the field, I had never seen this. I immediately knew that this was something special. And since then, whenever I meet colleagues in the field, I have asked each and everybody who is either specialist in lithographic printing, in Islamic art, in Hajj certificates, or whichever other field relates to this particular document, nobody, whether in Iran, outside of Iran, has ever seen this. So even though it is a very modest document in terms of, say, quality, if that be a criterion, it is extremely unusual and thus extremely precious, both in terms of being preserved as a single specimen and telling us something about the Shi'i attitude in the 19th century.
More questions? Basin?
Sorry?
How large are the sheets of the paper?
The sheets of the paper, 24 centimeters in height and approximately 2 meters wide. So if you divide the 2 meters by 6, it's 6 sections glued together. You have an average of 32 to 35 or so. Probably just as large as a large double page of a book, because that was the size of the slabs of stone they would use to print. Okay.
Thank you very much for coming, everyone. I cannot thank you enough for taking time out. And Dr. Marzolph, thank you very much for traveling from Germany. Both the Folklife Center and African Middle East are greatly benefiting from your expertise and knowledge. Thank you very much again.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.